And audience, it's my absolute pleasure to have with me today Judge Jason Lidyard. Jason is a judge in the drug court in the heart of New Mexico. His area spreads over three very large counties in New Mexico. And I want to welcome you, Judge. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to be here.
So you understand the work of the Centre for Innovative Justice. We look at smarter ways of delivering justice. We look at trying to make the justice system a positive intervention in people's lives. I've read a terrific piece about you in the Washington Post, and I thought our students and other people would be really interested to hear about your court and your views about how you make the drug court a positive intervention in people's lives. But before we get to that, how did you come to this position? I know that you were a legislative staffer in Denver after you finished college. You then went on to law school. What happened after law school? What happened from then?
Well, after law school, I was in the state of Maine at the University of Maine. I decided I wanted to come back west to practice, and I came down to New Mexico, where I used to come a lot of times when I was younger, because I have family in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I took the bar exam, and the first place that I was offered a job at was the district attorney's office for the First Judicial District of New Mexico, which is the district that I'm currently a judge in. And I was a prosecutor handling a variety of different cases for 8 years before someone gave me the nudge to run for judge, and I decided I should maybe put my name in the hat and see what could happen. And it ended up being my opportunity, and I was able to be appointed by the governor and then solidified my position through an election. And I've been a judge in the district for the last 4 years now.
And for our audience, of course, judges are elected in the States as opposed to what occurs here. But after becoming a judge in 2018, my understanding is that, Jason, you were looking for a process whereby a judge could actually make change through their own authority. Is that how you came to get involved in the drug court?
Drug court was one of the assignments that I was given when I became a judge. I preside over felony level cases, which encompasses everything from low-level possession of controlled substances up to sexual assault and homicide cases. And when I became a judge, I realized it was an opportunity for me to maybe correct some of the things that I identified as a prosecutor that I thought were flaws in the system. Specifically, the short-term incarceration of individuals due to failing to report and positive urinalysis. I saw a lot of people going in and out of custody for failing to meet those technical requirements of probation or their conditions of release. And I thought that if we could maybe minimize the amount of incarceration that we are inflicting upon individuals, especially for these minor infractions, that we could create more stability in those individuals' lives, that we would see less incarceration and more connectivity with resources to hopefully address our real concern, which is recidivism by way of commission of new crimes. So that was something that I was interested in trying to correct. And given my position of being a judge, I now had discretion that I could use in those particular areas to try to stop that revolving door of short-term incarceration for technical violations.
So just for our audience's sake, can you explain the theory behind drug courts? How are drug courts supposed to operate, and why are they different from other courts, for instance?
Certainly. So drug court is an alternative to incarceration. It's also an alternative to probation supervision. So upon being convicted of an offense, a person is referred to the drug court program instead of going into custody or being referred to probation. And while in the drug court program, people are obligated to meet certain weekly obligations for counseling, urinalysis testing, and completion of certain types of treatment requirements. If they are able to fulfill their requirements each week, then they advance throughout the program. And it is roughly about a 1 year to a 2 year term to complete the program. And once someone completes the program, if they do so successfully, then they can be discharged from further obligations under that criminal case, as opposed to going into custody and serving their time there, or going on to probation and having to fulfill reporting requirements and other types of obligations under probation. They're referred to the drug court program, and their supervision is through the drug court.
So many drug courts around the world, as you would know, work by, I guess, using incentives and disincentives, sort of carrots and sticks, if you like. If a person who's participating in the drug court program does the right thing, they might get a small reward, a carrot, so to speak. And if they do the wrong thing, don't turn up to appointments, have a dirty urine analysis, there could be the stick. They might have to go to jail for a period of time. What you seem to be saying is that approach doesn't necessarily work as far as you're concerned.
What I found as a prosecutor who was assigned to the drug court program and watching other judges manage the program was that individuals would fail to report to the drug court. Sometimes they would have a positive urinalysis. And the response to those types of violations of drug court were to incarcerate an individual. And I oftentimes saw that individuals would continually violate for in these technical ways and exhaust all of their potential sanctions to eventually be discharged completely out of the program and not have the opportunity to engage any longer with the services that could be provided. And these were infractions, like I said, for failing to report or providing positive urinalysis. And these are individuals that are addicted to controlled substances. They're physiologically addicted, they're psychologically addicted. They need the substance to stay well. So for me, watching people be incarcerated for the very reason for which they were being referred to the program seemed like it wasn't the best utility of incarceration, that maybe there was a better way of addressing the situation short of incarceration to try to promote participation and to create a catalyst for change. And when you tell a person who's dependent upon drugs and they need to use them in order to stay well to not use, that doesn't mean that they're overnight going to stop using. It took them a very long time to get to where they are. It's going to take a very long time to get them out of where they are. So I thought that instead of incarcerating people for the very reason why they're there, which is substance use, and instead of incarcerating people for failing to report, which isn't creating a danger to anybody, let's give them an opportunity to continue to engage in the program. And instead of putting out bench warrants, which will even create a bigger barrier for them to engage with the program, give them an opportunity to report, give them an encouragement to report, and give them positive feedback and motivation so that they will create a continual participation in the program so that we will have the opportunity to help them make the changes that they need to make in their life to get out of the criminal justice system.
It sounds pretty sensible. It also sounds like you actually want people to turn up, even if they have a dirty urine screen. The fact that they're turning up means some support can be put around them. But when I say turning up, my understanding, Judge, is they don't necessarily have to turn up to a formal court. You've actually had your drug court sit in a whole range of different, unusual places. Would you like to tell us about some of those places where your court has sat?
Certainly. So when the pandemic hit, the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March of 2020 in the United States, all the courts went on a lockdown, and we weren't having drug court at court anymore. We were doing it by Zoom, and given the resources of our clientele in the drug court program, they were only able to call in by phone at best. So it was always me talking to my computer to blank profiles on my screen and keeping in touch with my clients. At a certain point, after about 2 months of doing that, my clients started asking me, Judge, when are we going to get to see you again? It's been such a long time since we've been able to have contact with you. And I told them, well, let me look into it and see if there's some options, because at the time, the safety protocol didn't restrict activity outside. And I thought, well, maybe if we met somewhere other than inside at a courthouse, maybe somewhere outside, we would be able to have enough physical space to distance. And if everyone wore a mask, that we would meet all the safety protocol. So I started going around town looking for different places, and I found this park. And right next to the baseball field was a bleachers. And above the bleachers was a canopy. And I thought, well, this is perfect. It's enough space for everyone to space out. There's enough seats where everyone can have a seat, and we have a canopy in case there's any weather. So we started meeting there. And from what I've gotten in the way of feedback from my clients is they really enjoy meeting somewhere other than the court. And that's a very key thing that people need to keep in mind. And as lawyers or judges, we don't think about it when we go to court. It's a very familiar place for us. But from what I've learned from my clientele, they get an enormous amount of stress and anxiety every time they walk into a courthouse. Every time that they've ever been to a courthouse, they've been treated poorly. Either they've been admonished by a judge or told that they didn't do something right. And oftentimes they were arrested and taken into custody while at a courthouse. So coming to court creates an enormous barrier for individuals in a drug court program. They get a lot of stress and anxiety, like I said, by showing up to court. And sometimes that will induce them to not show up. And other times it's been known to cause people to use controlled substances before they come to court because they're dealing with such stress and anxiety. So by having court at a neutral place, like an outside park, I believe, and I think it's shown in my participation rates, has created a greater reporting consistency among my clients because they don't carry such stress and anxiety each time they have to come to court.
And that sounds wonderful. Also, I know you understand the importance of user experience. You understand the importance of lived experience from your own background, but also in relation to the peer support program that you have on probation. Can you just give us a little bit of an understanding of your own lived experience and also how important you think peer support is for people on the program?
Well, my lived experience with substance use is from growing up in a home where I had a parent who was struggling with substance use. Throughout my childhood, my father struggled with using substances, and it ended up resulting when he was 45 in a fatal overdose. Despite my father's struggles with substance use, he was an enormous figure in my life. He loved and cared for me like every father. He, despite his substance use, always carried a job and was able to provide financial support to my family. So I learned from having a father who suffered from substance use that despite those failings, individuals provide enormous roles to others in their lives that we as members of the criminal justice system may not always consider, that those important and positive aspects that criminal defendants have in the lives of others that we don't get to see in front of us. And for that, I've always kept in mind the humanity behind the individuals that come in front of me, remembering that behind each individual that comes in front of me is a mother, a father, a sister, and a brother, someone's significant other, someone that's providing something extremely important for someone else that I'm just not seeing, whether it be, like I said, spouses, significant others, or children. And we need to keep that in mind, that there's humanity behind every individual that comes before the court. And with respect to how that factors into I guess the way that I treat the individuals in court is always remembering that the answer shouldn't be incarceration. You shouldn't look to incarceration as the first response to every situation, that there are circumstances behind violations that may justify the reasons for them occurring, that if we sat and listened to the individual and understood their circumstances, we might be able to have realistic approaches to the problems that they face that are inhibiting them from being able to complete their requirements. And by having those actual realistic approaches to the issues, that we can have a more positive outcome for the situation that the person is dealing with.
And you actually use some of those people who have come before your court as peer support workers for others that come before the court. Do you find that works?
I do. An individual who is a peer support worker is someone with their own lived experience of coming to court, being incarcerated, dealing with substance use disorders, and the other circumstances that come from being involved in the criminal justice system. And by partnering a criminal defendant with a peer support worker, they have an ally that they can rely on, someone that they can confide in and tell their circumstances to, someone who understands their circumstances. And because of that shared experience, they can develop a relationship of trust that they otherwise cannot do with other individuals involved in the criminal justice system. People in the criminal justice system oftentimes have never dealt with the same struggles that individuals that are facing charges or on probation are facing. And as a result, they are unable to build those relationships of trust with the players in the criminal justice system. Like my peer supported probation program, it is an alternative to supervised probation. And the reason why I did that is because there's such a interesting dynamic between probation officers and criminal defendants. A probation officer fills two very drastically different roles. They fill the first role of being the monitor, the supervisor, the surveiller, the individual who's watching to see if there's any issues that this person is having in complying with the requirements of probation. And if they fail to comply with them, then issuing a warrant, having them arrested, and holding them for a probation violation. But at the same time, they serve this diametrically different dual role, which is to be a social worker, someone who is trying to identify issues that the person's facing to help them, to address them and rehabilitate them. But in order for somebody to have the issues in their lives actually addressed, they need to be open and honest about the struggles that they're facing. But oftentimes, being open and honest about the struggles that someone's facing, they're going to be giving information to the person that may cause them to be in violation of their probation, or at least be an indication of a violation of probation. So because this individual that criminal defendants are partnered with, a probation officer, fills these two roles, they're unable to be open and honest about their struggles. And as a result, their probation officer isn't aware of what they're really facing to help address those. Because if they are open and honest, they might be in violation of their probation. So because they can't create these relationships of trust with probation, they're never able to really address the real issues that they're facing. And it creates this awful circumstance where their situation's never addressed, and they oftentimes become violators of their probation requirements. So instead of putting people in the position of having to deal with that dynamic, I've given some criminal defendants an alternative of being into peer supported probation, so that they have somebody that they can be open and honest with to address the circumstances in their life. And it's not going to result in a violation which will cause them to be incarcerated. So as a result of breaking down that barrier that people face on supervised probation, allowing them to be open and honest about their struggles, our peer support workers are able to address their real issues with realistic approaches that really address the issues that they face, and I believe stop recidivism from occurring.
Judge Jason Lidyard, you're doing some amazing work. There's no question of doubt about that. It's been wonderful talking to you about your experience and your court. My last question is this: if you had one or two bits of advice for people watching this, whether they be lawyers, judicial officers, law students, based on your experience, based on your court, based on your progression, from a law student to a drug court judge, what would those two bits of advice be?
I would say that the greatest piece of advice that I can give individuals involved in the criminal justice system is to encourage them to try something new. For decade upon decade upon decade, we've been arresting, prosecuting, and incarcerating people who are involved in the criminal justice system solely because of substance use disorders. Currently, we have more drugs out on our streets than we ever did before. They're cheaper and more potent than they ever were before. What we've been doing is not working. We need to try something new. And we need to have the courage and perseverance to try something new and to continue to see if we're able to change the way that we deal with this issue. Because if we continue to do what we're doing, we will see the same results over and over again. So that would be my greatest piece of advice to anyone working in the criminal justice system.
It's great advice, Jason, and all power to your arm. You are a reformer. We need more people like you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm sure our students and lawyers watching this will take on your advice.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a true pleasure.